This is a story about finding meaning, an emotional life journey wrapped in a mysterious self-discovery arc. Emily Jackson spent years searching for a purpose, until the day a colonel mocked her in front of everyone. What she does next, and what he never knew about her rank, changes everything. Emily Jackson stepped off the transport bus with the kind of silence that didn't draw attention, except to people who understood what true authority looked like. The morning wind slid across her face, cold and metallic, carrying the faint bite of jet fuel and wet earth. Fort Bryer wasn't loud, but it was tense. She could feel that before she took her third step. She adjusted the strap of her canvas bag against her shoulder. The fabric was still warm from her hand, grounding her. She wasn't here for ceremony. She wasn't here for introductions. She was here to watch, to understand, before anyone realized she mattered. A young private rushed past, the boy's boots scraping the gravel. His glance flicked toward her quickly, then away even faster. Fear, she caught that in a heartbeat. Something in his expression tightened the knot already coiled beneath her ribs. Fear that didn't come from war or training. Fear shaped by someone alive. Emily moved forward, letting the sensation settle like dust on her skin. Observing came easily to her. It always had. Small things revealed more truth than reports ever did. Posture, silence, the subtle rhythm of people trying too hard to appear invisible. She catalogued the patterns almost unconsciously. Boots out of alignment near the motor pool. A sergeant correcting a recruit with a tone too soft, as though volume itself might provoke consequences, and that heavy quietness behind doors that should have been filled with normal military chaos. Something was wrong here. Wrong enough that she felt it like static at the edge of her hearing. As she crossed the courtyard, she saw him for the first time, Colonel Briggs, tall, broad, and carrying himself like the base belonged to him in ways the regulations never allowed. He barked orders that weren't instructions so much as demonstrations, as if power meant noise. His laugh cut through the yard, harsh and self-satisfied, echoing a second longer than necessary. Emily paused just enough to read him. He didn't notice her. Not even a glance. It didn't surprise her. People like Briggs rarely noticed the quiet ones, until the quiet ones held the sharpest blade. She stepped into the administrative building, its fluorescent lights flickering in a rhythm that reminded her of old naval corridors she used to walk at 19. Terrified but determined, she inhaled deeply, letting old memories rise, then fall again. This wasn't about nostalgia. She was here to understand the truth beneath the paperwork the Pentagon had handed her. Inside the logistics office, she spoke softly with a clerk who pretended not to shake. His eyes darted toward the door every few seconds, as if expecting someone to burst through it. "Don't like when we mention delays," he whispered. That single word told her far more than the spreadsheets lying on the desk. She thanked him and moved on, her footsteps steady, measured. She didn't take notes yet, only mental ones. She wanted to understand the feel of the place before putting anything into ink. 2 hours later, she stepped into the mess hall for a small break. The air was thick with the scent of overbrewed coffee and stainless steel. She had barely taken a seat when she heard it. "Look at that," a booming voice said from across the room, dripping with casual disdain. Another consultant pretending to be important. Briggs. Emily didn't turn her head. She didn't need to. His voice filled every corner of the room, demanding attention the way a child demands validation. He kept talking, mocking, performing for the officers who sat with nervous smiles plastered across their faces. Emily ate in silence, every muscle relaxed, though her mind tightened into a cold, quiet focus. She wondered how long before he discovered who she truly was, and how he would react when he realized the woman he mocked, the one he had dismissed, without a second thought, outranked him by a mile. Emily lifted her cup and took one slow sip. Tomorrow, she thought, eyes narrowing slightly. Tomorrow the real work begins, and the colonel had absolutely no idea what was coming. If you're drawn to life-meaning stories, faceless YouTube narratives, and slow-burn suspense, stay with this journey. Like, subscribe, and keep watching. The tension only gets deeper. By the next morning, Fort Bryer felt different, not calmer, just more aware. Emily Jackson sensed it the moment she stepped outside her temporary quarters. A strange heaviness clung to the air, as if the base itself anticipated the shift she hadn't yet begun. She walked with measured steps, letting the early light guide her across the courtyard. Soldiers moved around her in careful patterns, their eyes following invisible boundaries shaped by someone else's anger. She noticed it again, the fear tightening shoulders, the hesitation in footsteps. The rigid salutes meant not for respect, but for survival. It made her jaw tighten. Her first stop was the vehicle maintenance bay. The smell of grease and old metal settled in the back of her throat as she approached a young mechanic hunched over a transport truck. He stiffened when he saw her. "Ma'am, if you're here for the inspection logs, I can explain." Emily raised a hand gently. "I'm here to understand, not to punish," the boy exhaled. Shoulders sagged. She waited, letting silence create safety. "They make us skip full checks," he whispered. "We mark inspections as complete even when we barely touch the engines. If we take too long, the colonel says we're wasting time." There it was, truth wrapped in fear. She thanked him, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly. Weeks, maybe months, of pressure. She moved on. In the infirmary, she found shelves of expired medical supplies tucked behind sealed boxes of new ones. Bandages stored improperly, missing narcotics logs. A medic pulled her aside when no one was looking. "Please don't mention that I told you," he murmured. "We've reported shortages before. The colonel said we were being dramatic." Emily listened, the weight in her chest growing heavier. Fear suppresses truth, and suppressed truth rots everything it touches. As she walked toward the training grounds, voices carried toward her, harsh, abrasive, unmistakable. Briggs. He stood in the center of the field, yelling at a squad struggling with formation drills. His mocking tone echoed across the yard, slicing the morning open with the sharp edge of humiliation. Pathetic. Even recruits 2 decades ago moved faster than this. Emily approached quietly, stopping just behind the line of soldiers. She took in the scene, the colonel's inflated stance, his self-satisfied smirk, the troop's shame. Then she saw what triggered it. A recruit had misaligned the rear guard position by less than 2 inches. 2 inches. Briggs caught sight of her, and his grin widened. "Oh look," he boomed. "Our paperwork specialist is here. Maybe she wants to show us how drills work on her spreadsheets." A few soldiers flinched. Others stared at the ground. Emily stayed still, calm, unaffected. She stepped forward and adjusted the recruit's stance with the smallest movement, a gesture so precise it silenced the entire field. "This alignment reduces exposure on the flanks by 12%, she said softly, "and prevents cascade errors during live maneuvers." Her tone wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than Briggs's shouting ever could. The colonel's laugh faltered, his face reddened. His ego scraped against the edge of her competence, and he hated it. "You really think you know more than me?" he snapped. Emily didn't blink. "No, Colonel, I know exactly what I know." The soldiers held their breath. Briggs tried to bark a retort, but something in her stare, steady, unyielding, quietly powerful, stopped him for a moment. Just one moment. But it was enough. She turned away, leaving the formation corrected behind her. The colonel's voice didn't return immediately, and every soldier on that field felt it. A shift. Small, dangerous, inevitable. Fort Breyer's fault lines had begun to crack. Asterisk. If you love faceless suspense stories and emotional life journey narratives, stay with this unfolding conflict. Like and subscribe to follow Emily's mysterious rise. Asterisk. Rain threatened the sky that afternoon, hanging in dark folds over Fort Breyer. Emily walked along the eastern perimeter, letting the wind cool the heat that still lingered in her chest after the training ground confrontation. She hadn't intended to challenge Briggs publicly. She wanted time to observe, gather, understand, but some moments demanded presence. As she passed the barracks, 2 soldiers nodded subtly at her, not with fear, not with obligation, but with something closer to respect. Respect born from witnessing competence where they had only known bluster. Emily kept her gaze forward, though she felt the shift like a pulse beneath the skin of the base. Inside the supply depot, she examined storage racks. Discrepancies jumped out easily now. Labels rewritten, missing equipment signed off by phantom signatures, items logged but nowhere to be found. Voices hushed when she stepped deeper inside. One corporal approached timidly. "Ma'am, you corrected the colonel this morning." It wasn't a question. It was AEW. Emily paused. "I corrected a drill, nothing more." He shook his head. "Nobody corrects him. Ever." The weight of that truth settled on her. This wasn't just poor leadership, it was leadership that had crushed the instinct to speak. She moved on. By late afternoon, she found herself near the comms building when voices drifted through the slightly open doorway. Familiar ones. "Briggs again. Asterisk. She thinks she's special because she can read a spreadsheet," he snapped. "I've run this base for 10 years. I won't let some soft-spoken nobody tell me how to do my job." His aide murmured something inaudible. Briggs continued, louder, "She's a visitor. When she leaves, this place goes back to normal." Emily leaned against the wall, unseen. Her heartbeat remained steady, but inside, a single thought cut through the noise. He truly has no idea who I am, and maybe that ignorance was what would destroy him. When she stepped inside moments later, Briggs didn't bother masking his disdain. He crossed his arms. Are you here to check my stapler alignment? The aide froze. Emily simply responded, I'm reviewing operational communication logs. She walked past him without hesitation, without apology, without fear. Briggs bristled, the first sign that her calmness was more threatening to him than any raised voice could ever be. Hours later, as twilight settled over the base, Emily stood on the steps of her quarters, reviewing the day's findings when a soft cough drew her attention. The sergeant from the morning drill stood there. Ma'am, he said quietly, I just wanted to say thank you for stepping in today. Emily met his gaze. The man had years carved into the lines of his face, years of service, discipline, endurance, and beneath all of it, years of being dismissed. You don't need to thank me, she replied. Maybe not, he said, but someone needed to do what you did. People notice. Emily didn't answer right away, but something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a shared recognition of what leadership should look like, and what it had become under Briggs. As the sergeant walked away, Emily realized something crucial. Loyalty had begun to shift, not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Toward her, she closed her notebook, the faintest edge of a storm tightening inside her. If the colonel continued pressing against her presence, he would soon collide with a truth he wasn't prepared to face: her rank, her authority, and the consequences of mocking someone who outranked him more than he could imagine. And somewhere inside the darkness of the base, she felt it. Fort Briar was beginning to choose sides. If you're hooked by this suspense narrative and love faceless emotional storytelling, stick with the journey. The next morning arrived with a sky bruised by storm clouds, thick and low, pressing against Fort Briar's rooftops like a warning. Emily Jackson felt the shift immediately, a subtle murmur among soldiers, an energy that moved through the base like currents beneath ice. Whispers followed her now, not out of fear, but anticipation. Emily walked toward the main administrative hallway just as Lieutenant Ramos nearly collided with her, eyes wide. Ma'am, Colonel Briggs. He's furious. He's saying you're undermining his command. Emily studied him calmly. And what do you believe, Lieutenant? His throat tightened, but his answer came steady. I believe you're the first person who listens. That truth stayed with her as she entered the operations wing. Voices spilled from the briefing room, loud, strained, unmistakable. Briggs, snooping in every department, he thundered. She's digging for problems that don't exist. Emily stepped inside quietly. Conversation shattered. Briggs spun, eyes blazing. Jackson, perfect timing. Care to explain why my officers are suddenly terrified to make routine decisions? Perhaps, Emily replied evenly. They aren't afraid of decisions. They're afraid of consequences. A murmur rippled through the room. Briggs stepped closer, anger radiating off him. You don't belong here. I've run this base for a decade, and you're a visiting pencil pusher, nothing more. Emily held his gaze, unblinking. If you believe that, Colonel, then you're ignoring the realities documented across every department. She slid a folder onto the table. Maintenance logs, medical supply discrepancies, training audits, proof. Briggs's jaw clenched. Fabricated, all of it. A young captain stepped forward hesitantly. Sir, the reports are accurate. We verified them. Silence, a visible fracture spread across Briggs's expression. Disbelief mixed with the first flicker of fear. Emily didn't push further. She simply gathered her notes and walked toward the door. Where do you think you're going? Briggs barked. To continue my work, she answered. There's more to uncover before headquarters arrives. That single sentence drained the color from his face. Headquarters, he hadn't known, and now he understood. The truth. She wasn't a visitor. She was collecting evidence. Real, documented, irreversible evidence. Emily stepped into the hallway behind her. The room erupted, officers whispering, Briggs pacing, denial cracking into panic. Fort Briar was shifting faster now, and the colonel finally felt the tremor beneath his feet. Storm rain hammered the base that afternoon, drumming against metal roofs with relentless force. Emily moved through the courtyard under her hooded jacket, each step steady, deliberate. Soldiers paused as she passed, offering nods, not protocol, but genuine acknowledgement. By the time she reached the command center, 3 unfamiliar vehicles had pulled into the lot. Black SUV, government plates, doors opening with synchronized precision. Headquarters had arrived. Emily didn't stop to watch the reaction, but she felt it ripple outward: confusion, shock, then realization spreading across the faces of officers and enlisted personnel. Inside the briefing hall, Colonel Briggs stood at the podium, rehearsing a speech he had clung to for years, polished confidence layered over insecurity. His aide whispered something into his ear, eyes darting nervously. Briggs straightened, smoothing his uniform. Good, they're here to see the base run well. I'll show them excellence. The doors opened. A senior official entered first. Then Emily. She removed her hood, revealing the insignia she had kept concealed out of choice, not necessity. Rear Admiral Emily Jackson. A collective gasp filled the room. Briggs's eyes bulged. His posture crumbled inch by inch, the air punched out of him by the gravity of what he saw. He whispered, Emily stepped forward calmly. Rear Admiral Emily Jackson, Internal Operations, Oversight Command. Briggs staggered. No, you've been walking around inspecting, talking to my people. Yes, Emily said simply, because that's my job. A job you made significantly easier by assuming I was beneath you. The evaluators took their seats. Emily opened her folder. Pages of meticulously documented failures echoed across the polished table. Maintenance violations, supply mismanagement, training inconsistencies, abuse of authority. Every line a nail. Briggs tried to speak, but his voice cracked. This is an ambush. No, Emily replied gently. This is accountability. The room felt frozen in time. Soldiers outside the glass panels watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. For years, they had endured humiliation under a man who believed intimidation equaled leadership. Now they saw the truth breaking him open. Briggs gripped the table to steady himself. He wasn't angry anymore. He was terrified. This base, Emily continued, will not fail because one man believes volume is a substitute for competence. She closed the folder. End with that motion. Briggs finally understood. Every mockery, every dismissal, every arrogant remark had been aimed at someone who held the power to undo him entirely, and she had the storm cleared by morning, leaving Fort Bryer washed clean, as if the sky itself had participated in the purge. Sunlight crept through lingering mist, catching on the metal edges of vehicles now lined neatly across the grounds. Emily Jackson walked the perimeter alone, feeling the shift echo through every corner of the base. Soldiers stood taller today, voices carried differently. Doors opened without hesitation. Fear loosened its grip. Briggs was removed quietly. Before sunrise, escorted off the grounds without ceremony or salutes. Some soldiers watched from windows, not out of cruelty, but closure. For years, the base had been held hostage by a man who mistook dominance for strength. Now he was gone. Inside the operations center, Emily briefed the officers with calm authority. She outlined new protocols, clear reporting structures, maintenance rotations, and accountability processes. No shouting, no ego, no theatrics. Just competence. A captain raised his hand. Ma'am, what happens now? Emily looked around the table at the tired faces finally able to breathe. Now, she said softly, we build something better. And they did. Throughout the week, Emily moved from department to department, guiding without hovering, correcting without shaming, reinforcing discipline without fear. She restored what Briggs had broken: trust, morale, purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the barracks, Sergeant Hale approached her. The same Sergeant Briggs had humiliated. Rear Admiral, he began, voice firm. I don't think I've ever seen this place like this. People believe in the work again. Emily nodded. That was always possible. They just needed a chance. He hesitated before adding, thank you for giving us that. Emily didn't respond right away. She watched the soldiers drilling in the yard, movements sharper, voices stronger, teamwork finally visible in the smallest gestures. Fort Bryer was alive again. Later, as she packed her notes for the final report, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought of Briggs, his arrogance, his downfall, the painful truth of leadership gone wrong. But this story was never about revenge. It was about meaning. Purpose. The kind of purpose you only discover when everything inside you refuses to tolerate injustice, even in its quietest forms. As Emily stepped outside into the cool night air, a ripple of salutes met her. Not required,